We recognize these images, these events, as dreams, acts of the imagination, inductions and intuitions. We learn to recognize them as such. Or we don't. We don't recognize them, but still something exerts so much pressure on our minds that something must take material form, and we will exert our bodies to do so. We exert our bodies in an act of picturing, a volitional act that turns these occurrences into pictures which are available to other minds, many minds. The picture tells us something about what was imagined. These pictures are what we see with our eyes. We observe them. They look back at us. Images are events in nature, events in our bodies and in the bodies that our bodies are part of. By that I mean the intricately nested and rhizomatically connected living systems that function integrally, function in the way that living things function, not like a machine functions. These events make life possible. Reproduction is impossible without these events. The word reproduction, we might say that we use this word in both senses, one for the natural world, the other for images, but really it's just one sense, which is to reproduce the form of one body in another. One thing, then another, and so on, one after the other. An image is a child of an image, and it may also be parent to another. Imagining may be the most vital thing that living things do. I wrote about these events, these occurrences within bodies, in Art in Australia's issue on the Event Horizon, noting that they are catastrophes, in a sense developed by mathematician René Thom. Note that I don't mean these kinds of catastrophes, though they may have many things in common with images. Actually, some of them might be images or composed of them, I'm not sure. I got this list from a Wikipedia page, by the way, an accidental poetry. If you type in the word catastrophe, you'll see it. It's still there. I'm sure it has gotten longer, actually, since I last saw it. Thomas Zebiok, in his Introduction to Semiotics, writes that in Thom's panoramic conspectus, the formation of icons, which is the term used by semioticians for images, appears throughout the scale of nature as a manifestation of the universal dynamic of irreversible character. A model ramifies into a replica, isomorphic with itself. And of course, every replica can be itself a model. And so it goes on in an eternal process of branching, as Zebiok says. I will say, I have implied already actually, that though, yes, every image is the child of an image, contrary to Zebiok, not all images are parents. To be a child is universal. To be a parent is not. Parenthood is highly contingent. Nothing is eternal. At the moment I say that just because of the logical structure of images, but I'll say it again soon for other reasons too. Tom's theory of images is a theory in topology, a branch of mathematics. It's a theory of surfaces. It is a study of surfaces that change without tearing. As I wrote in the essay, it's a theory of surfaces that helps us model sudden disjunctive changes while still preserving the form or matter of a body. According to Tom, there are 7 types of catastrophe which can be modelled in 7 topographies of multi-dimensional folds. It's the folds that get you both continuity and discontinuity. The catastrophe that's easiest to talk about is the cusp, with a triangular fold and 3 layers of surface, one caught between a top and a bottom layer, out of sight, a pleat. The graphs of each catastrophe show types in their simplest form. In real life, as we say so much these days, surfaces must be deeply folded, deeply implicated and caught up in each other. Anyway, as I wrote in the essay, I wonder about that middle layer, which according to a colleague of Tom's is inaccessible, though he also writes that it is the least probable and unstable. What else can I draw your attention to in this concept of the image? As I said, and it's worth repeating, none of us is outside nature, not one. That includes us, the human bodies, the sites of human imaginings. I mean the body in the sense of my body, your body, and the collective bodies we're part of. We are not outside nature. What else can I say? Image making is conservative. Similarity of form and the bodily functions that go with it is conserved, even though something entirely other appears in the world. Strange though it is to say it, catastrophes are stabilizing events. Image making is also imperfect. There is a degree of unpredictability depending on the environment in which the reproduction happens and how that environment is changing. How a life is produced and reproduced over generations depends on the conditions in which the events of reproduction occur. As things go on, information is lost. Typical forms change as one thing comes after another. A population drifts. It drifts until it collides with a catastrophe, like one of those that were recited a moment ago. Let's say in this case that a volcano explodes. This is the black rock, the very edge of the lava that flowed hundreds of thousands of years ago in this area. That event punctuated the drift. It destabilized the living system beyond the point it could tolerate, beyond the point where it can still be that living system that it had been up till then. And so it became something else. This is an other that is different from what came before, but in a different sense. In the catastrophe theory of an image, similarity is conserved across difference of bodies. It is a numerical difference. A child is not the parent, only like it. But sometimes the child is disturbed and becomes something qualitatively different from what it was born to be. Sometimes the adult form collides with one of those catastrophes. A volcanic eruption, a blue sky catastrophe, an iron catastrophe, a black hole. Anyway, what else? A catastrophe cannot be undone. It's irreversible. What else? There is no maker. There is no maker. What am I? I'm an artist. So what does this mean for me? In presenting to you this definition of an image as catastrophe, I've given a naturalistic account of images, but only in a quite specific sense of the word, what a semiotician would call an icon, which is quite a different thing from the icons that some of us have kissed. And I do think Tom's panorama, his theory of images, might present to us a bridge between the domain of the quantified and the quantifiable and the domain of qualities, values and ways of appearing which, with Brian Masumi, I think are unquantifiable. Values are unquantifiable. At any rate, this is not an argument for reducing qualities, values, and ways of appearing to quantifiable variables. I'm a naturalist in that I assert that we are not outside nature, but not in keeping faith with dogmas of reduction. Some do keep that faith. Certain philosophers in the Western European tradition have been obsessed with it, and that has leaked out into other practices, especially those interested in decision-making, like economics and computer science. But I don't think that fidelity to reduction holds much sway in the natural sciences anymore, by which I mean the biological and physical sciences. Don't take my word for that though. I'm an artist. So what do I say? One easy point first. Catastrophe, in the sense that semioticians mean it, does not exhaust meaning. Zebiok, for instance, writes about 6 species of signs: signals, symptoms, icons, indexical signs, symbols, and names. Apparently Charles Peirce identified 66 varieties, including intermediates and hybrids. Nor does any sign in real life signify in just one way, as an icon just say, but not as an index or symptom. Nothing is that categorical in nature. There is a less easy point, but it's a more important one, which tips us out of biological theories of science and into ethics and politics, which is where we need to be now. All bodies imagine, but not all bodies make pictures. Just that statement has rich possibilities for a number of ethical and political discussions. But for me, there are 2 questions I'm interested in this contemporary moment. One is, how do we go on? The answer to this question has something to do with images. Images are how things go on. It's an event, though, outside our volition. So how can we choose anything about how we go on? Well, what are the conditions in which those events occur within us? The images that occur in us, within our bodies, are produced and reproduced in those conditions. Our imaginations are engendered in them, in those conditions. So what are the conditions in which we will choose to live? What choices can we make? What imaginations, what bodies will we choose to have? The other question for me is, how can things be different from before? The answer to this question has something to do with pictures rather than images. Right at the beginning, I spoke about pictures in a broad sense. Pictures are not images. They are manipulations of matter and arrangements of bodies into other bodies. These manipulations and arrangements are done by a body that can not only imagine, but can also make. I regret the bias towards the visual, but I think what I'm talking about also works for speech acts, vocal acts, writings, songs, and other composed sound, other uses of the body, and so on. And also, I'm not speaking only about what artists make, though I will say something about what artists make soon. When I say pictures, I mean the things that we, alone or collectively, make that are for other bodies to experience as meaningful. Pictures are not faithful reproductions of the images in our minds, but they do form part of the conditions I mentioned, the conditions in which images occur within us. There are two ways that the makers and what they make can be co-opted. Two ways that I'm afraid of anyway. One is that the makers have their making tightly controlled. We usually call this work, though it does take in other activities too. Those with that power to control have the power to co-opt our bodies and their powers of making. I'm less afraid of this co-option than the next. After all, it's been with us for a while. We understand it better, I think, and we've had the experience of pushing back. It's a more transparently political issue. The other co-option I have in mind is the sweeping up of pictures, what is made, in the huge flux of image reproduction that engenders our digital and screen cultures. When I say that, I'm thinking of all of us, each of us alone, picturing, constantly producing pictures that become part of an accumulation that has kick-started into something that has the properties of a large, relatively unintelligent living system. So under our own volition, mostly, we make our pictures. Under the volition of no one in particular, they become part of something that has its own powers, its own forces, a system that is capable of catastrophic change. I did say the volition of no one in particular. I was trying to capture a sense of a system with its own dynamics. But the infrastructure of this system is owned. Its structural and connective tissues have been built by someone, made by someone. I'm talking, of course, about social media platforms and the free search, sharing and storage services. These owners own us with plausible deniability because they keep our pictures. These pictures are added to that accumulation and freely available, they enter the minds of others, becoming part of their imaginations. It goes in the other direction too. Pictures made by other bodies, not all of whom love us or care about us or make a life with us, enter our imaginations too. Our imaginations are spilling over. Our minds are very full. For me, one of the horrors of now is that capitalism not only has our time, which it takes in the form of labour, it has also captured that fullness, turning it into information, which it mines. It turns it into another kind of surplus, as Brian Masumi says, something different from the surplus that comes from labour, but still, the point is that it is captured. It also destroys the potential for fullness by taking up entirely, it seems, what seems to be available capacity, exhausting the body so that it doesn't want to look for more or do the labour of looking, which I think is a fairly heavy labour sometimes, but all the same to lose desire for it is a loss. So what I'm afraid of is the destruction of our imaginations, the destruction of the potential for a fullness not owned by others, and the destruction of the ability to be open to what is strange and unpredictable and discomforting. A world without that potential and openness is not a world that will be open to what artists do, I think. That presents its own ethical dilemma for artists. What does it mean to be an artist? How do we go on? What is the work of an artist? How can we resist catastrophe but still remain alive? Resisting catastrophe could, after all, be terminal. What is the work of an artist? It is making. It is an act of volition, a decision to act when there is no need to do so, when it is entirely up to her, the artist. With each act of making, the artist discovers what it means for her to make something, to do this rather than that, because there are many other things she might do. Some of them might actually make her some money, which, as we know, is necessary for life in this contemporary moment. Each decision to make something is a renewed decision not to be co-opted by the desires of others. It's also a decision not to force others and not to subside under the pressure of others. And it is a counteraction. It's important in these catastrophic times that we know this. Everything can be otherwise. Very little is necessarily the way that it is. Every point on a line demands our imagination, even though every point might be terminal. Resisting catastrophe. I hardly know what this might be, so this bit will be short. But I am a maker of pictures, so I will keep faith with them rather than the images. They will keep going without me. So that means keeping faith with opacity, ambiguity, slips, slaps, sticking tongues, broken links, going off target, misfired speech acts, waste, small thefts, forgetfulness, reversals, revisals, irregularities, caves, weeds, islands, mountains and mountains of sand, black birds, fog, dogs, hollows, holes, pockets, holes with pockets, pleats and leaks, tears and the torn, stitching, repairs, exiles, orphans, adopted ones, childless ones, bodies, chimeras, being reborn, surfaces of bodies, not just surfaces, interfaces, sibilance, suddenly stopped, dust, grit, fuzz, the felted note, not folds, but whatever is obscured in the fold.